In the latter part of the 19th century, there was a controversy over what instrumental music was all about. Purists felt that symphonic music should carry with it no extra musical meaning. A symphony was simply a beautiful and even powerful arrangement of sounds. However, composers such as Richard Strauss and Franz Liszt were writing smash hits with works that told a story in music, called program music. Edward Elgar managed to inhabit both worlds. His symphonies and concertos are pure music. His Falstaff is program music. Elgar undertook a massive symphonic study on Shakespeare's character Sir John Falstaff from the historical plays about Henry IV and V. He remarked that he enjoyed writing it more than any other music I have ever composed, but insisted that it must not be imagined that my orchestral poem is program music, that it provides a series of incidents with connecting links. Nothing has been farther from my intentions. Then he contradicted himself by writing a 4-page article for the Musical Times describing what goes on in the piece. Falstaff is a character made up by Shakespeare wholly of incongruities, Elgar wrote. A man at once young and old, enterprising and fat, a dupe and a wit, harmless and wicked, weak in principle and resolute by constitution, cowardly in appearance and brave in reality, a knave without malice, a liar without deceit, and a knight, a gentleman, and a soldier without dignity, decency, or honor. Elgar then describes the piece as practically in one movement, with 2 interludes, and falls naturally into 4 principal divisions which run on without break. To start, we see Falstaff in a green old age, mellow, frank, gay, easy, corpulent, loose, unprincipled, and luxurious. The remainder of the work takes us to the bustling London streets where Falstaff is monarch. There, among ostlers and carriers and drawers and merchants and pilgrims and loud, robustious women, he at least has freedom and frolic. Then it's on to the edge of battle, where the light-hearted knight, who had once before led his men where they were soundly peppered, jokes in the face of danger. Suddenly, it is announced that the prince is now King Henry V, and Falstaff hurries himself to London. The king appears, but instead of embracing Falstaff, Henry proclaims, "How ill white hairs become a fool and jester! I banish thee on pain of death." Thus begins Falstaff's death scene. He is so shaked that it is almost lamentable to behold. Concerned about whether you'll be able to remember all of this while the music plays, and a lot more happens. Don't fret. Maestro Andrew Constantine has ingeniously overlaid some dialogue from Shakespeare's plays to help us all on our journey through this brilliant orchestral showpiece. "I'm just an ordinary Czech musician," Antonín Dvořák insisted, just as his career was reaching its peak. He may have started out as an ordinary Czech musician, but he certainly didn't finish that way. His father was a butcher in a small village near Prague. Antonín learned how to play the violin when he was quite young and left home, against his father's wishes, when he was 13 to study music in Zlonice. He developed his chops to the point that he could play viola in the town orchestra. 3 years later, he moved to Prague to continue his studies. Eventually, he became the principal violist at the National Theatre. Throughout the 1860s, he remained just an ordinary Czech musician, but in the 1870s his stature grew. For several years, he received the Austrian State Prize, a sort of scholarship for budding young artists. One of the members of the scholarship committee was none other than Johannes Brahms, who subsequently wrote to his own publisher, Simrock. "I have been receiving a lot of pleasure for several years past from the work of Antonín Dvořák of Prague," Brahms wrote. "He has written all kinds of things, operas, symphonies, quartets, piano pieces. He is certainly a very talented fellow, and incidentally, poor. I beg you to consider that. Simrock did consider that and asked Dvořák to submit some dances, called the Slavonic dances, and offered to pay the princely sum of 300 marks. Simrock made a small fortune. More importantly, Dvořák was suddenly no longer a novelty composer from a cultural backwater. Now he was famous throughout Europe. Dvořák began writing his violin concerto the year after he wrote those Slavonic dances, and in the same year that Joseph Joachim premiered Brahms' violin concerto. Joachim was the go-to guy for all things violin, so when Dvořák completed the concerto, he sent it to him. 2 years later, Dvořák visited Joachim to get his opinion. Dvořák sent a report to his publisher. It pleased him. As for me, I am glad that at least the whole business is finished. He was so kind as to make over the solo part, and only in the finale have I to make a few alterations and in some places to lighten the instrumentation. Interestingly, even though Dvořák dedicated the concerto to him, Joachim never played the concerto in public. Throughout, Dvořák seems to be recalling those Slavonic dances that made him so famous. In our country, we wait until a person is long gone before we declare their birthday as a national holiday. We're pretty stingy about who we celebrate. Just a few presidents and Martin Luther King get the honor of a named national holiday. Imagine getting to take the day off from work to celebrate a living composer. That's what happened in Finland in 1915. The event was John Sibelius's 50th birthday. With compositions such as Finlandia and Kullervo and his symphony, Sibelius, perhaps more than any other person, helped forge a distinct national cultural identity for the Finns. From his birth all the way up to the First World War, Finland was not an independent country. Instead, it was a duchy of Russia. In 1899, Sibelius wrote 7 little pieces for an event called the Press Celebrations. The event was intended to raise money for newspaper pension funds, but it was really a front for rallying support for a free press at a time when the Tsarist hold on the country was tightening. The last of those 7 pieces was called Finland Awakens. In the following year, Sibelius reworked the piece and retitled it Finlandia. However, in Finland it was called Impromptu because of the Russian censors. It serves almost as a second national anthem in Finland to this day.